Hey guys, so welcome here. This is a kind of behind the scenes look at how I made Skirmish. Not 100% behind the scenes because the actual video file is on my laptop. My laptop is a piece of crap, so I'm not going to be able to record and show you what I really did. So I've just got a few clips here from Skirmish that are in this timeline to show you how I did pretty much most of the work in it. So this is how the footage looked on its own. This is just it standard. That's straight out of my DSLR, my Canon T3i. For those curious as to what I edit in, this is Sony Vegas Pro 15. Yeah, it says it right there, Pro 15. The biggest thing of this was color correction. So I went and did a basic just track level correction. All I had was brightness and contrast, color corrector, and film effects. Brightness and contrast, all I did is I lowered brightness a little bit, upped the contrast, and made the contrast center be a little bit off to the left, which helped bring out these shadows, as you'll see. See, so there's this light haze of everything. Now everything looks a little bit more in focus, I guess you could say. Everything's a little bit sharper, the shadows are darker, and that sort of thing. Now the next thing, this is what does most of the work, is the color correction. First, what I messed with is I would mess with highs. So once I got it to where I wanted it, which is somewhere over in this direction. See, I've got this orangish hue to it. It gives that old film look. The number specifically I went with was right about here. Gives it this old film look, which is very nice. There. So it helps to give that old film look. The mids is where it brings out the rest of the color. The highs just get, their faces and all these other bright colors. The mids is what helps get the rest of it. That brings out the green here, as you'll see. The olive drab becomes much more old looking. It just starts to look a little bit better, and you start getting this old film look. Now the next thing I went in and did with this is I went and I messed with this, saturation, gamma, gain, and I don't think I messed with offset. So the first thing I messed with is saturation, so I had to pull the saturation down a lot. So I pulled it down to, I think, about right here, somewhere around there. So saturation, that is the biggest thing, because this goes from looking, bright and warm, which of course it's a DSLR. DSLRs just record very warm, to now being very muted, very dark. This is almost a little bit too much. See, I always think at first when I do it that it looks bad, but then when I look at the other clips, I'm like, no, it fits. Now, this looks fine. So the next thing I messed with is gamma. I raised it a little bit, which kind of offsets the contrast in here. And then the last thing I messed with is the gain. This is the overall brightness of everything that isn't just brightness and contrast. It's the high end. And I brought the gain down just enough that everything gets a little bit darker. It gets that feeling of they're literally in a storm right now. Like when we filmed this, it was actually raining. So all this rain, that's not added in, that's legit. That really was there. And finally, the last thing that I did, the thing that really brought this together, is the film effects here. This adds grain and tint. The tint color by default is this yellowish color, which fit very well. I also enabled particles in this, which allowed for you to see the little blips that will pop up on the screen. So when if I turn this on, this helps to bring in that film grain you can see. So like if I turn the grain down to 0, it looks like nothing. Turn the tint down to 0. This is basically what it normally is. And then the tint helps to bring out that orange into everything. And the grain also just makes it look old. Now particles, that's where you get, in fact, you might see a few of them pop up. It's more of when you watch it, any of those little white blips that keep popping up across the screen, that's the dust, namely, that I turned on. I didn't really have anything else on because I didn't want it to look too bad, but later maybe I might. In another World War II or even anything else like this, I might do that. So that's the basic of the color correction overall. And some of them I had to edit individually. So some of the best examples I have of that is this clip and this clip. This one is actually extremely dark compared to this. This is the shot I kept referring to for how I wanted the color to look. Then this one has almost the opposite, and it's a little bit too bright when compared to this. It seems a little bit too out there. So The way I fixed this is I'd go into the individual clips effects, and for this, since it's just brightness and everything, I went and added a brightness and contrast. So in order to brighten it up, I literally went into the brightness, turned it up a little bit, lowered the contrast, and put the contrast center a little bit more to the left again. This helped bring out everything. So as you can see, original clip, if I mess with contrast center, that, you don't really see it a lot. You see it more so when the actual contrast comes in. So the contrast, once I back that off, now you can actually see this M1919 a little bit. Their stuff is not as dark. The shadows aren't as out there. And then when I would bring the overall brightness up a little bit, that helps to just bring out those shadows. And you can also see a little bit of those blips I was talking about. Those dust that you can see on it. So that helps just bring this clip from this into this, so it fits more in the motif. Now this one is the exact opposite. It's a little bit bright. Once again, I added brightness and contrast, but instead I went in the opposite direction. Instead of going negative with contrast and positive with brightness, I went negative with the brightness, positive with contrast, trying to darken this a little bit. So when I turn that back on, this one I did not do a lot on. It's barely a thing, but when you turn them both off, you can see a clear difference between the two. It just helps to bring out that haziness that you kind of see in everything and makes it pop a little bit more. The next biggest thing with this, besides the look, was the sound. I did record this on my Canon T3i with my Takstar SGC 598 microphone. The Takstar is good. It's a decent microphone for being sub $30, not gonna lie. But it and my T3i, I'm still figuring out how to properly get levels on it. So for this, I had the levels set way too low. I didn't put it in auto or anything, so it was quite low. A lot of the audio ended up coming up like this. Super duper low. So what I had to do is I had to end up going in here into the audio effects and raising this full 12 decibels to get it into something that seemed a little bit more real sounding. Now, where this also became a thing is that this is edited, but normally the sound sounds like this.
Whenever I see a bush move, that's it. That's not suspicious.
And in the video, it sounds like this.
Whenever I see a bush move, that's it. That's not suspicious.
You notice there's a clear difference. If you don't have headphones in, you might not hear it. But with headphones on, you'll hear that unedited, there's this hiss, this audible hiss. It is very loud. Well, it's not very loud, but it's there and it's noticeable. So what I had to do is I had to go into the track's audio effects and pull down the highs. I could have done a noise removal or something like that, but I've tried that before and it sounded terrible. So I found that if I just went and did a high-end cut, it helped to bring it out quite a bit, enough to the point that the audio sounded good enough on film.
Whenever I see a bush move, that's it. That's not suspicious.
But I will say, if you are looking for a budget microphone to record short-range stuff, say for interviews or things like that, the Takstar is actually very nice. Long range, it's not the best, but short range, it is quite good, and it doesn't sound too bad. That's one thing I noted. That's one thing I have noticed is it doesn't sound too bad, which is quite shocking for a sub $30 microphone. Now the problem with the audio editing is that once I raised this up, gunfire got incredibly loud. So here's one of the first initial shots whenever they're in the actual battle.
Two at a time. Squad. Go, go, go.
All right, so that is how it was edited. It's not too loud, and the gunfire isn't overpowering, and the audio, when there is not that bad. Now, the way this clip specifically has to be set up is like this. I had to go in and manually go onto the clip and remove from a group the audio so I could take the audio and move it wherever I wanted. Because what I had to do is I had to take the clip and I had to cut the audio out of it and pull it so then where they were talking was in a separate audio track than where the gunfire was. The gunfire When it was in with this, it got incredibly loud. Headphone users warning, this is going to be possibly really loud. This is what it sounded like before I made them in 2 separate tracks.
2 at a time. Go, go, go!
Really loud. Really loud. Way too loud. My audio meters are peaking at 9. That's way too loud. So I had to separate them and then pull it to where the gunfire is in a separate track like this. Now, when I did that, I couldn't just have the audio do this. I couldn't just have it go, because you hear when it gets louder. So what I had to do is I'd have to take the audio and I'd have to overlap it. I'd overlap the loud from the quieter to the loud and have a fade. So between them it's just, it's still noticeable, but of course, you know, when you drag it out farther and farther, yada yada yada, it won't be as noticeable. Much better. Now, for later, right here, where you can see that there is the gunfire that started, I didn't have to overlap it as much because it was just an all of a sudden there's a loud sound. So it just can drop out unnoticeably and you won't hear it.
Go, go, go!
No difference really. Now, that's what I had to do for pretty much the entire timeline, was pull the audio back and forth. A lot of the audio was like this. It was detached from its original video source and just kind of put all over the place. Now we will get to my favorite part, and that was the blood effects. So we have the 2 blood effects. We have 1, 2, which are both really simple. And then my favorite one of them all, which is where our German buddy here gets gut shot. Absolutely love that effect. First of all, the way that I did this is I went and I actually bought a blood pack from Detonation Films. It's a little old, but it worked. So I had to go through and find my different blood shots and found out that the ones I liked, but I found that the 2 that I liked was this one and this one. Both similar, both different. So what I first had to do, go to my effects and add chroma key here. Then my other ones I'd add would be Gaussian blur, saturation adjustment. I will explain in a minute about the other 2. Let me just turn those off. So first of all, chroma key, this is our first thing. I would go to the color, adjust it all the way to black. Perfect. Well, almost perfect. I can barely see our blood. So what I have to do is I have to go to our high threshold and pull it way, way back until we can actually see our blood. Boom, there it is. Now the issue is this, all these black particles. So now we go to the other side, we go to the low threshold. We pull it until it's mostly gone, but still there a little bit because we still want a little bit of something behind it. And now we have blood. Now that we have it keyed, we just need to get it to where it's on him. It's currently not anywhere in the right spot. So now we have to go to pan and crop. First of all, it's on the wrong side, so we have to flip it horizontally. Now the problem is when you flip something horizontally, you gotta remember things are backwards. So it's a little bit big, so we make it a tiny bit smaller. And now I want it to be on this shoulder right here. So I'm gonna pull it, put it kind of on his shoulder, make it a little bit smaller, pull it, put it right about here. So now we have blood going, boom, right off him. But if you notice, the blood is really in focus, whereas he kind of isn't because he's in motion. He's a little bit farther, he's a little bit in between where the focus was. So now I have to make the blood look not as in focus. So now I have to go in to Gaussian blur here and add in it. So obviously that's way too high. So I'm just going to do flat 0 and flat 0. So now we have no blur. Since he's barely away, I have to do it as a very minute blur. So like 0.00, let's say 3. And then 0.003. Now, the difference between blurred and unblurred is noticeable, but it works. Because now, it's far away and you can't see it as well. So now, it looks more like it actually came out of him and goes into the environment rather than it's fully in focus on him. Now the saturation adjustment. This is because the blood is extremely red compared to everything else. So in order to make it fit, I'd go to the low end of the saturation adjustment and pull it down. No? Or is it the high end? What? Oh, I have to turn it on first. So once you turn on saturation adjustment, if you have it off, you pull low end down and you want it to be not gray like this, but you don't want it to be, super red. So you want it to be right about there, roughly. It kind of fits. It's not as big and out there, and now you have blood that shoots off this guy. Funny thing also, originally this clip, there's only one shot. In reality, the way the clip plays out, it sounds like this. So really you only get blood on one shot, because you only hear that one. This one is actually just this sound. Once again, I took that out, ungrouped it, and copied the sound and moved it up, because he has a small reaction right there from his head as if he got shot. So I added a sound and added a blood effect. So he gets shot. Now the second blood effect, this one has a little bit more into it. All right, so we have the effect here. Here's the blood. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So once again, we have to do the exact same things. So I'm going to go into this. I already have these added in. I already have them set up. So all I have to do is turn them on. Blah, 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 saturated. Boom, there it is. Everything's right. Now, this is where it gets more in depth. That is on the pan and crop. Here, we have to create a whole new mask. I deleted the old one. So we need this to be behind his arm. So what I'll do is I'll go here to our anchor creation tool and create mostly a big box. So I know I'm going to need about 2 or 3 points here. So I think 2 right there, then here, and then boom. Okay. Wow, that was actually really close. So now I have the mask made. Now if I want to manipulate any of these, I have to go down to the split tangent tool and hold control, and you can now move these. This helps in editing because now you can actually look at your clip and add and move around your mask and see it in real time. So now if I move these around, looks like I'm going to need a third point. So now I have a point here roughly and a point here roughly. So if I add one in the middle, click, I can now move it around, pull it down to right about there where his cuff is. And now we have a mask that follows his arm. Next frame, his arm has now moved down. So we'll create a new keyframe, and I want the blood to actually be a little bit more visible. So I'm going to grab this bottom, the back, and this one, and pull them down. Well, it's about as visible it's going to get. So go over to the next one. Next frame. Now his hand has blood in front of it. That's not what I want. So I'll go back to my masks, my mask stuff, and I'll move things around here. Okay, so after failing around for a few minutes, I don't know what happened, but apparently the mask is not doing this anymore. I don't know why, but normally I would cut this out from his hand. So in the video, you would see it to where the blood just goes right around his hand entirely. And then from here on out, Oh, and then it's cut off a little bit here because it's in front of his hand. And from here, it just goes on its own. I don't know why the mask won't let me do that anymore, but anyways. Now, we get on to the best shot of them all. This one. So this is actually two blood effects on top of each other. You can actually see there are two different effects right here. If I mute one, there's one, there's the other. But I just have them together because they created a very, very nice and very violent blood shower that shot right out of this guy. So I'm not going to explain to you what I did with those because literally it's the exact same thing I did here. Now the masking on this is different. I'll actually mute this one. And for this, I'll go ahead and show you the mask is actually this. This looks really simple, and that's because it is a mask right here for the tree. So then the blood disappears behind the tree. Because otherwise, you would see it go in front of the tree, and he's actually not in front of the tree. With this mask, we now have blood that goes behind the tree. And it's the same thing on this one. There's our tree cut out. Now, I could have cut out this vine as well, but because of how dark everything is and how fast this moves, you don't really notice that one as much, but you notice the tree. This shot also had a little bit of audio work with it too. The original audio clip sounds like this.
Don't make me shoot you.
You hear that sound? That is actually the photographer who is there, wonderful guy named Joe Bemis. Check him out on Facebook, Victory Productions. I'll have the name pop up on the screen and a link to his page. He does a lot of reenactment photography. If you just want to see some really cool photos, he does absolutely amazing stuff. He's even got some pictures from this event, some things that I didn't even get on video that were super awesome. He was a wonderful guy to work with. And I'm not knocking him because he got some great shots at this place. It's just that I happened to capture his shutter at the exact same time of this really awesome shot. That obviously couldn't stay in the video, even though the gun sound is beautiful. Now, of course, you can say, oh, well, why don't you just cut it out right there? Well, the problem is you hear the gunfire keep going, that of the gunfire as it goes through the air. If I just have it go bang and then cut out, it's going to sound weird. Once again, I had to cut it out and detach the audio from it and completely delete it. And I needed to find another point in a clip that had a single M1 Garand fire that would work, like a single shot. Luckily, we had one. It even had that other sound with it. So, what I did is I added it in, and you hear, and it fit. And of course, I overlaid this, so then the original audio came in. But the problem is, the difference between and is noticeable, and I didn't like it. So what I did is I had an M1 Garand sound effect from somewhere, I don't even remember where, and I added it in. The M1 Garand sound effect is this. It does good, but I can't have it too loud, because if I have it too loud, you'll get this, which is super duper loud. I had to pull it down. If I had it, say, about here, it sounds good, but it's still a little bit too loud. It sounds a little bit too different. So I had it pulled down enough that it just added a pop. It added the pop it needed to make it sound better. So that's how this entire little shot had so much work go into it. That was about it. That's about all the extent of the effects. The only two big visual effects are the blood shots here. Everything else was just edited. You know, just put together and everything. If you have any other questions or comments or anything like that, you can post that in the comment section. I'm thinking about doing some Vegas tutorials on how I edit some stuff or just how I do things. If y'all think that's a good idea, leave that in the comments as well. And I look forward to doing many more behind the scenes looks at some of my other videos that I produced later. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.